If you want to hold the strings in your own hands and you are not afraid of jumping into the trenches and getting your hands dirty, then self-hosting n8n on a VPS is the way to go. In this video, we will take a look at how you can get started self-hosting your own version of n8n on a virtual private server. We will cover everything from choosing the VPS, setting up the server, some basic security measures to connecting a custom domain. If you're only here for the unlimited workflows and you want to save yourself a few bucks in comparison to the fully managed n8n, then you might be better off running a self-hosted version of n8n on managed infrastructure, to which I will link some providers down below. I also created a step-by-step tutorial right here on GitHub. You can follow all of the steps right here in the tutorial, and I will link the tutorial also down below in the description. The first thing that we need is a virtual private server, and I chose Hetzner as a provider. I've been with Hetzner for almost 10 years now and made some really good experiences with them. And if you want a little head start, you can get 20 euros worth of credits by using the affiliate link in the description. Even without the affiliate link, I can totally recommend them because they provide great service for a very reasonable price. I am logged into the Hetzner Cloud dashboard right here, and I already created a demo project. Inside of this project, I will create a new resource and I will choose server from the drop-down list. To begin with, it usually makes sense to go with shared resources because they are cheaper, but if you have very specific requirements, you can also choose dedicated resources right here, which are a little bit more expensive, but you get a lot more computing power. So this is the server that we are going to create. It has 2 vCPUs, 4 GB of RAM, 80 GB of storage. If you ever outgrow this server, you can always upgrade it later if needed. As a location, I will just run with the default in Helsinki. It makes sense to choose a location that is closest to you or to your users. The operating system, I will also go with the default, which is pre-selected to Ubuntu, which is fine for me. And for the networking part, we are going to use the pre-selected options, which is a public IPv4 and a public IPv6. But if you are progressive and you don't really care about your service being reachable from every little corner of the world, you can also turn off IPv4 and save yourself a little bit of money. SSH keys are the recommended way in order to connect to your server. I will click on add SSH key right now, and now it's going to ask me for the key and a name of the key. And if we go back to this tutorial I mentioned earlier, you can find 2 commands that you can use in order to generate SSH keys. I will copy this command right here, and then I will paste it in my terminal. Now you can change the email address, for example, use an email address that you actually use, but in my case I will just use this default address, and then it's going to ask me where I want to save this key. I can copy the path to the SSH folder, and then I can write a name and call this key demo, for example. Then it's going to ask me for a passphrase. I will just type a super secure passphrase right here and hit enter. And then my key has been created. And one thing that we need to do is to add this key to our SSH agent. And we can do that using the SSH -add command. And then we will write the path to the key and key name. So I will just copy it from above. I need to enter my super secure passphrase, and then I have added the SSH key to my machine. The SSH key consists of 2 different files, so I can list all SSH keys in this SSH folder. And you can see I have a bunch of different files in here, and we also find the demo and demo.pub file that we just created. And take note that you never want to share this demo key. This demo key is your private key and it has to stay on your machine, and you never want to share it with anyone. And if a website like Hetzner is asking for your SSH key, they are always asking for this public key. We can take a look at the key by using nano demo.pub right here, and then we can just copy this public key from the key file, go back to Hetzner, and I will paste it in right here. Then I will click on add SSH key, And now if we want to connect to our server, we are going to be using this SSH key. I don't need to add a volume. The server already comes with storage out of the box, and I think the storage is going to be enough, but you can always add volumes later if you need some additional storage. We do want to add a firewall, but we are going to create the server first, and we do want to enable backups. It's always good to have a strategy for data loss, and I would recommend you enable backups if the data means anything to you. That's basically all of the configuration that we will set right here. I will choose a different name, call this one demo, and then I click on create and buy now. So the server is provisioning in the background, but what we can do in the meantime, I will go over to firewalls right here and we will create a firewall. We want to add 3 different rules to that. First one is opening TCP connections on port 22, which is required for SSH access, so we will leave that one. The second one we will limit to port 80, which is usually used for HTTP connections. And then we create a third rule on port 443, which will be used for HTTPS connections. And we will leave port 80 open in order to forward requests that are coming to HTTP, and we will just forward them to HTTPS. And we will allow all outbound traffic, so no need to add a rule right here. And then we will apply this firewall to the server that we just created. So choose a demo server from the list, click on apply, and then click on create firewall. Once the firewall has been fully applied, it is time to configure our custom domain. So let's go back to the server tab right here. I will click on the server, and then we can find 2 different IP addresses, the IPv4 address and the IPv6 address. So head over to your DNS provider. In my case, it is United Domains. Then we will look for the A record, and then we will paste in our IPv4 address right here. I will also lower the TTL right here to 300 seconds instead of 600, because in case we make a mistake, we don't need to wait for 10 minutes, but only for 5 minutes until we can retry. But of course, you can leave the default settings right here. I will click on save to apply the changes for the A record, and then I will scroll down a little bit further and we can find a record where we can point our IPv6 address to. So let's go back to the Hetzner dashboard. I will copy the IPv6 address, then I click on add, and then I paste in the IPv6 address, but make sure to remove the subnet right here. And then I will click on save. So now the domain is pointing to our server. If we go to n8n.vimadev.app, we can see nothing, and this is expected because even though the domain is pointing to the server right now, we have no one to accept these connections. And in the last step, we will take care about this. So head back to the Hetzner dashboard and copy the IP address again. Then we will go into our terminal and I will type in SSH root, which is the username, at IP. And now it's asking me, are you sure you want to continue connecting? Then I will say yes. And as you can see, the terminal now changed. It tells me I am logged in as root user on this demo server. So every command that we're executing right now, it will be executed on this demo server. And the first thing that we want to do on the demo server is update it. And we can run apt update first. And then after that, we will write apt upgrade-y, which will upgrade all of the outdated packages on that server. I will go back into this little post that I shared with you earlier, and I will scroll down a little bit, and we can find a link to the official Docker documentation. I will click on the link, and then I will find a page which is called Install the Docker Engine on Ubuntu. And if we scroll down a little bit, all we need to do is we need to copy these commands right here. First of all, set up Docker's apt repository. I will just copy the script, paste it in, and hit enter. And once that is done, I will scroll down a little bit, and then we install all of the Docker packages. I will just copy the command, paste it in, and hit enter again. I will confirm by hitting enter, and then I just wait for a minute until everything is installed. For the installation finished, we can try if everything is working by running docker ps, and if we get an output like this one, container ID, image, command, created, status, ports, names, which means the Docker daemon is running. As a next step, I will go back into this little GitHub tutorial and I will just clone the content onto my server. Of course, you can just create these files manually. You don't need to have a reference to this repository on your server. You can also fork this repository first if you want to make any changes and update it. Here I can just run git clone, and then I will clone the content of this repository on this server. Now, in general, if you're cloning random things from the internet, it is a good idea to have a good look at what you are downloading. So you can inspect everything in this repository. It is public, and you can take a look at what's inside these folders, what kind of files or evil viruses might be there. The repository has been cloned successfully. If I type in ls, I can see there is a new folder which is called self-hosting n8n example, and I can cd into that folder by using the cd command, and then I type in the name of this folder. And if I type in ls-a, we can see there's actually a little bit more. We also have a readme in here. We have the git repository, and we have this .env.example file. We will rename this file, and I will do a move.env.example, and I will type .env. And if I type in ls-a again, we can see the file is now called .env. And the last thing that we need to configure right here is we need to add our domain. So if we open the file nano-conf/caddy file, we can see there is a placeholder for the domain, and we use the domain n8n.vimadev.app. In this example, I will just save the file and exit out of the file. And once the caddy file is updated, we can use docker compose up-d to run everything in the background in order to install 3 different services: n8n, Postgres, and caddy. Postgres is the database that we will use in order to store our persistent data. n8n is basically the n8n service itself, and caddy acts as the reverse proxy. Why do we need a reverse proxy? A reverse proxy is basically the doorman that we put on our server, and all of the connections that come to the server, they usually knock on port 80 or 443. If you remember, 80 is for HTTP traffic and 443 is for HTTPS traffic. So whenever a request comes in, it comes in at port 80 or 443. And then caddy accepts these connections, and caddy checks the domain and sees, this is coming from n8n.vimadev.app. So I need to redirect the request to our service on the server, and caddy is handling SSL termination. It can do some caching, it can serve static files, and much, much more. So the output of Docker Compose up, we have a bunch of green check marks. What we can do now is we will run Docker PS again in order to see what is running. And as you can see, we have these 3 different services that are now running on the machine. So as a last step, I will go back into the browser and I will take a look at the n8n.vimadev.app domain. As you can see, we are now connected to n8n, which is running on our server on Ubuntu. I can create a user right here. Let's just fill in some dummy data. I will click on next in order to create this admin account. I don't want to save these credentials. I want to skip the onboarding. And there we go. Now you can start automating your entire workflow by using this self-hosted version of n8n that is running on your own Ubuntu web server. Now, obviously, this is just a tip of the iceberg. There are a bunch of ways of how you can extend the setup. I encourage you to take a closer look at hardening your server even further to make it more secure. You can take a look at how you can stream logs from your server into different monitoring dashboards and set up automatic CI/CD pipelines to deploy new versions of your software on the server. And if you don't want to dig that deep, just take a look at Sliplane.io, which is linked in the description as well. And Sliplane is a cloud provider that makes it very easy to host containerized software like n8n. That's basically it for this tutorial. If you did like the video, give it a thumbs up, like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends, and have fun self-hosting your own instance of n8n on a virtual private server.